Welcome all to DevNetwork's Developer Week webinar series. I'm Patrick Gallagher, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this week's featured webinar presented by Apptio. Apptio is a sponsor of DevNetwork events and transforms the way IT runs its business and makes decisions. With Apptio's cloud-based application, IT managers lead, plan, and optimize their technology investments across on-premise and the cloud. So before we get started with speaker introductions, I have a few housekeeping items. First of all, I'd like to remind our attendees that live chat and Q&A is available during the session. And you can raise your hand in the chat and ask questions in Q&A. Those are in the Q&A and chat sections of your webinar viewer to the right of your screen. Questions will be answered by Isaiah Rendorio from Apptio throughout the session in the Q&A section. So we won't be doing it at the end. We'll be doing it throughout the presentation. Second of all, there are handouts available in the handout section of your web viewer as well. So you can grab those now, or you can wait till the end, but make sure you do go there and grab that great information provided by Apptio. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and made available within 24 to 48 hours after the event for additional reviewing, or you can hand it or send it off to your coworkers so they can check it out. So, thanks for taking a moment to listen to the housekeeping, and let's talk about the session and our speakers. First of all, joining us is our moderator, Stephen Trask, a senior manager with Apptio. And joining Stephen are the technologists from Humana, one of the largest health insurance companies in the world, including Jared Artz, Humana's cloud technology leader, and Patrick Gray, Humanity's senior infrastructure capacity management engineer. Jared and Patrick will have an in-depth discussion around the past, present, and future of FinOps at Humana. So, without further delay, please give your undivided attention to Stephen first, and then Jared and Patrick.
Hey everyone.
My name is Steve Trask, and I look after the cloud program at Apptio Cloudability. You may have heard of FinOps. It's a combination of systems, best practices, and culture to increase an organization's ability to understand cloud costs and make trade-off decisions. Last time we were on DevNetworks, we covered the practice, and this time we're going to be hearing from the FinOps team at Humana about their experiences in helping the company-wide digital transformation to the cloud. So let's get started by passing across to Jared and Patrick. Over to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for taking time to attend and hear Patrick and I's journey and broader like our Humana teammates' journey. I know your time is valuable and we're grateful for the opportunity to share our perspective. So before we roll, would you kindly go to the next slide? Just wanted to go through a quick, this is what we really want to cover, right? We want to walk through our goals. What do we want you all to get out of this? Covering our journey, where we've been at Humana and our approach to cloud, because I think it's a little bit different. It started cloud native, it's pivoted to a hybrid approach, and then as a result, our goal as a FinOps team has changed. Walk through then where are we at today with the approach and where are we? And then most importantly, kind of the last goal is let's talk through some lessons learned. So what are things that we wish we would have known early on in the journey, and practical tips and advice that perhaps you can take and learn the easy way instead of the hard way? And so before we get into that, I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. As Adam said, I'm one of the IT leaders co-accountable for Enterprise Cloud Financial Management, our Cloud Process COE, and kind of day two operational readiness for our engineers across the enterprise. I joined Humana in 2018 and spent my time leading the enterprise cloud operational capabilities amidst, as Adam said, our broader technology transformation to improve healthcare. Patrick, would you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Jared. So along with Jared, I'm accountable for the enterprise cloud financial outcomes within our tech advancement program. And together we've been collaborating to define and iterate upon our strategic priorities as we also focus on building out the day-to-day cloud financial management processes. I've been with Humana in various network operations roles since 2014. Most recently was overseeing our software and hardware lifecycle management program, and I've been with the cloud finance team for almost 9 months now. So we're coming up on a year this fall. So
yeah, and before we pivot to the goals, I also wanted to add some context on Humana, and Patrick would welcome your thoughts on this. For those of you who don't know what Humana is about, we're a Fortune 100 health insurance firm that's pivoting to a wellness company. And so with that, we have roughly I'd say 5 million to 10 million members, depending on how you choose to count what a member is, that we're either delivering health insurance outcomes for, wellness outcomes, or actually providing care across the enterprise. And so with that, as one of the leading health and wellness companies, we're trying to pivot better ways to serve our members and provide differentiated value via healthcare insights and analytics. And so taking that business context, looking at IT and technology is critical to engage and drive that, not only with regards to, as Hugh said, around the pandemic we have, and as a result of remote care and remote delivery of care, but also some of the analytical insights. And so with that, Patrick and I serve roughly 5 segments or 5 business units, all the way from Humana government, all the way to our digital health and analytics. And that's roughly around a run rate of $1.2 billion a year that we're looking to actively provide visibility as we transition into the public cloud. And then Patrick, I believe you're going to walk through kind of the goals we wanted to hit with the attendees this morning. Is that correct?
That is correct. Sorry. So first off, we want to make this as informative as possible. As everybody is aware, like the financial and the cultural shifts that are necessary to adjust your application and support teams to a consumption-based model is a pretty daunting task. And we want to provide a little perspective on how our journey's gone so far, how we're dealing with some of these challenges, and what we're still faced with. And then secondly, we want to be interactive, so please post any comments and such in the chat. We'll try to touch on as much of that as we can at the end. And then also, please feel free to reach out after the call if anybody's got anything, other topics or otherwise to discuss. Happy to share experiences and continue to, improve our collective FinOps expertise together. So, and then lastly, we want to make sure that we are empowering you with a bit of knowledge and curiosity and perspective that we didn't have, as Jared mentioned, at kind of the beginning of our journey, that we've kind of learned and the takeaways we've had from those, so that you can leave this session in a better position to support your own enterprise in your journey.
Yes, so this is a dense slide, so just want to slowly step us through it. And really the goal is to kind of walk you all through where we were in summer of 2018 when I came on board to the firm, what our goal was and what it is now. And so you can kind of see 3 colors there coming from our assessment of what is our strategy around cloud, to one that was cloud first and focused on leading technologies, and then how we pivoted in the back half of the year in early 2020 to a holistic approach to cloud and transitioning and transforming our technology stacks to consume the public cloud. And so just slowly stepping through this, summer of 2018, we did a cloud well architected and well executed assessment, which was really based off of the Amazon or AWS well architected framework, and was kind of a play of how do we set up the environment in a way that's really good, as well as our processes and our procedures. And that's where we first looked and began to engage with cloud financial management as a part of that broader transformation. And kind of the one key things I would offer is setting up the foundation was critical for us, because we had inherited unintentionally, as part of an acquisition in 2012, an organization that had chosen to go venture into consuming Amazon's public cloud in a way that was very much like a data center. And so now Patrick and I are still continuing to deal with the consequences of that decision. And so that was one of the key learnings coming from that early part of the journey, is setting up and establishing, a consistent framework, much like the FinOps the principles and framework applies, to allow you to successfully visualize your costs. And so just then to continue walking through the spring of 2019, the winter of 2019 was really launching and taking into account for a cloud native perspective. And so when I use those words, I mean a true product team. And so this is a team combined of 7 to 8 individuals that are delivering services in a modern agile way, using cloud native services like Kubernetes, like functions, like platforms. And so really the solution we delivered was a little bit different and much more mature with regards to visibility than what we've had to pivot to as we looked at 2020 spring and 2020 through the summer. And it changed when we wanted to begin moving the vast majority of our workloads that are running into our data center into the public cloud, to begin capturing some of the value, both this, Hugh mentioned, with the ability to take on scalability that provides with the public cloud, as well as leading services such as the data analytics that are present. And so one of the key callouts that I wanted to step through for us, part of this journey, is we have multiple clouds. And so for us, that consistent tool set that we can provide across Amazon, across Azure, and across GCP, because of some of the choices our business partners and our technology organizations chosen to make has been critical, because managing not only the multiple technical service sets is hard, managing 18 different compute, 18 different storage, 18 different networking services in one cloud is hard enough, let alone 3. And so it's critical for us as part of this journey was adopting a common set of framework. So you can take the SKUs that you get from AWS API, the Azure API, and the GCP API, consume that data and present it in a consumable way for your business partners, your engineers, and your finance organization. And so then the other key call out, and I think I hit on a little bit earlier, but I really want to emphasize that the demands of a native approach is very different from the transitioning application teams. And what I mean by that is a hybrid approach. And so teams that ship code and then don't touch it again or manage the technology stack. So what I mean by that is pre-DevOps days, where you'd write the code, you'd sling it over the proverbial fence. It's an adjustment for them to understand, why do I care about costs? How do I implement it effectively? And then how do I manage this part of my overall product of value for the organization has been definitely one of the things we've worked through and struggled, and we'll make sure we address on that later in the time we have with you this morning. And so I know we're running a little bit fast, so would welcome if there are any questions in the chat. We can maybe pause, see if now is the appropriate time to address them, and if not, happy to hold them till later in our presentation or the end. So looking, Patrick, I feel like we have one, kind of what are our biggest challenge implementing FinOps. Do you think it'd be appropriate to hold that until we get to the key lessons learned?
Yeah, I think that we'll cover a bit of that, and then we can get into it.
Okay.
Deeper. Yeah.
Sweet. So let's hold it. Let's make sure we get back to it. And then do you want to walk us through kind of how we've looked at the 3 phases of FinOps and configured them for Humana, kind of a legacy organization?
Yeah, Wendy, if you can. Yep, there. Thank you. So as Adam was covering earlier there, the core of the FinOps cycle is really the inform, optimize, operate life cycle kind of process. And for us, we have really embraced that. Actually, it's been an interesting thing. Our team, our core FinOps team, all bought the FinOps book that they're giving away, and we read that collectively and kind of discussed it in kind of I guess you could call it book club fashion on a weekly basis, to take the lessons learned out of that and discuss how we could apply those when we're doing as we've kind of matured our practice. And it's been really helpful, but that framework has been a great way to structure our thinking around how we're approaching these problems. So one thing I wanted to point out kind of is that, for each phase, there's a bunch of subcategories, as you've seen listed and are on here. And there's kind of a progression for each one. And it's often in the book, it's called crawl, walk, and run. And it really embodies the idea that they're all iterative processes that you can enhance over time as you learn more and grow and you interact more with the business and get more feedback and can improve your processes. So for us, though, the key thing we've learned is that visibility really is the most important foundation to all of this. And by building that out, that's really been great at giving us better insight as we're interacting with our partners, as well as building our credibility as we're helping them make decisions, make recommendations, and helping them act upon that, so that we can, from that foundation of visibility, really have a FinOps practice that has buy-in and credibility from the business and the teams we're working with. So a little bit about some issues we've encountered and kind of as we've gone through this. One of the first problems we ran into was that while we do have an enterprise tagging and kind of account tenancy standard for the company, most of the existing cloud footprint had been deployed, as Jared was explaining, not using those standards. They've got a mix of custom tagging. They have very unique resource groupings that sometimes align to accounts or subscriptions, sometimes for an application, sometimes it's by environment that it's aligned, sometimes it's by the portfolio of applications all together in one account or subscription. And so the tenancy doesn't sit at the same level of hierarchy in terms of our application portfolio across all of our applications and teams. And so that was a big challenge because immediately we had to get in and get our hands dirty working with teams and understanding how they were using tags, how their resources were deployed, how they were currently reporting on things, because oftentimes we found that people had created these custom tags to enable them to see whether it was by budget code or by their department or by the specific person that owned and was responsible for support on that resource. And so they were using the tags kind of in a rudimentary way to provide themselves some level of visibility, but it was not aligned with our enterprise strategy. So we really had to then get in and understand that. And then we've also, as part of that, been helping to educate them around what the standards are, where we're seeing gaps. Cloudability has been a great tool for that. We've built out like an application tagging dashboard where we have visibility for what, on a day-to-day basis, how much spend is going to applications that or to resources that are untagged, who owns those, where they are in the environment, and then we leverage that in our regular conversations with the business to, thankfully, it's been to track the great improvements they've made as they have been having more insight to this and been able to go and work with their teams to improve the quality of the tagging. Saying that, so we've kind of gotten through all that. The other piece that we've really found helpful as we've understood better how the teams are using tagging, the business mapping. So in Cloudability, you can take basically anything that's in a tag and map it to something else. And for us, we use an application ID. It's a 5-digit code. You're looking at this stuff all day. I mean, if you know these things, you start to understand which applications are which because you know what the top 10 or 20 biggest things are. But for the average user, you're looking at this, and outside of your core application or applications that you're familiar with, just a bunch of numbers. So mapping those into the actual English names of the applications and building out that hierarchy, that's been a key piece of what we've been working on with teams to give them better visibility to their spend and be able to cut it up in different ways, leveraging the tagging, even when they've kind of used tagging in a way that was not exactly a standard. So as our understanding of the environment has improved and as we've become more engaged with teams, we've been able to shift our focus and our energy towards optimization. And part of that is, one, cleaning up the tags, getting compliance there, and identifying who owns what and working with them to get them the right reports and such. But really, it comes down to highly underutilized instances, the right sizing opportunities, and really under the optimized section within Cloudability, we've really then be able to dial in who we're working with and the reporting that we can bring forward so that they can see what their opportunity is, right? And we've focused a lot. We have one primary internal team that has a larger footprint by far than the rest of the teams in the organization. So we've really focused a lot of effort there. And as Jared said, it's the team that's been with us for 8+ years and that has had the longest footprint in the cloud. And not surprisingly, they also had the most opportunities. So in working with them, we have really been able to leverage that visibility to show them the opportunities that they have for cost avoidance. And just in the last few months, I mean, we've really been able to leverage that kind of just on a weekly basis. We meet with them 1-2 times a week to review this stuff. And we've seen, I mean, I would say it was probably almost between 12 and 15% reduction in spend, which based on the wastage reporting from a right sizing standpoint in Cloudability, we've knocked down almost 75% of their opportunity. And so it's been quite an enormous impact that we've had in a pretty short time. Now, again, it took a few months of really understanding what's going on and finding that common ground language-wise, what we were talking about, what they were talking about. We weren't just coming at them like we were a finance team and beating them over the head with budgets or something like that. But once we got on the same page and we understood what they were doing and they understood the perspective we were taking and trying to help them optimize, we were really able to partner and achieve some great savings. And that's really, I think, out of all of this, that's to me the key takeaway, right? Is that it's a partnership. Cost is one element of all this, and it's not about making things cost the least. It's about helping teams understand where they can be more efficient and giving them the levers to either choose to do that or based on business needs or value or other factors choose not to, but for good reason and understand why. So that's been a great success. The other thing we've been doing while we've been working with these teams is we've been working to centralize our rate reduction and volume purchasing functions within our enterprise cloud finance team. So that's been another area where visibility into the spend trends at like a vendor service or vendor product level has been critical. And we've been able to identify some great opportunities that we actually are about to make a very large purchase on to create some nice savings there as well. We've had some earlier savings in the year, but this is really our first big opportunity where we have a lot of growth happening and can really invest some dollars now to save a lot on the back end over time. And that has been a great partnership and collaboration with the business as well. That's allowed us to really understand what their usage is and come to an agreement of the balance between upfront savings versus those professional service credits and all these other aspects of it, like total value realized. What's really the best balance for the company and for their line of business? It's been a really eye-opening and informative experience, but we've taken that opportunity and used that to kind of map out that experience. So we've process flowed it so we can begin to leverage that going forward as we work with other teams to replicate this process and start to streamline it. So that's been a pretty fantastic kind of journey on that piece as well. One thing I would say there is that, again, going back to the credibility piece, it's important that you don't try to bite off too much at first. When we were starting to look at reservations and volume discount purchasing, we were looking at some big stuff, and we weren't getting the traction we wanted. And what ended up with this is, rather than taking the most aggressive approach, we kind of took it's not the most conservative approach, but we took a much more conservative approach. We maximized our upfront savings, but gave us the most flexibility so that if things change, we don't end up in a spot where we have a large degree of waste. And the key thing there is that when it comes to that credibility, they don't want to, especially with your first or second purchase of this type, you don't want to make the mistake of biting off more you can chew. And when your consumption rates change, suddenly be carrying a lot of expense that you're not going to actually realize any value from. So I definitely recommend taking it slow, going not necessarily for the biggest thing first, but doing it in an iterative approach and building up to that, like the whole thing. As Adam and Wei were showing previously, those companies went from 20% covered in RIs up to 80 to 100%. That wasn't in one buy. You got to build upon and get some successes under your belt before you move up to that point, because there's a lot to understand about this and a lot of partnership with the business that has to happen. So I know that was a whole heck of a lot, but one last thing to touch on here on the slide is so as we've continued building up the visibility and then working on these optimizations and achieving some outcomes from it, the other piece that we've really started to focus on is the reporting or tracking mechanisms and how to bring that forward so that we can show our leadership through the governance process, what are the opportunities we're seeing, what are the successes that app teams are having, and give them visibility into those opportunities and successes, as well as the consumption trends and spending data that we're seeing, so that as we begin to work with the TBM office and start bringing forward different forecasts and whatnot on our cloud spend from IT finance, that we can then start to layer in these rate reduction opportunities so that we can account for the actual spend we're going to be incurring, not just the projected spend based on the rack rate. So I'll pause there. Jared, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you said it really well, but I think maybe the only thing I would re-emphasize of what you shared with those is that the biggest challenge is it takes time and to build credibility. And kind of as we walked across visibility to optimization to operations and run through that cycle, going slow and laying each foundation thoughtfully and communicating carefully is really key. And I know we have wanted to walk through that lessons learned, but I really just want to emphasize that that's been our biggest success. But also the biggest challenge is being patient. So with that pivot, do you mind if you kind of go to slide 32, just kind of walk through maybe some of our guiding ethos or principles that we've leveraged that have been successful for us? And I'm sure many of you know as kind of business leaders of the speed, quality, and cost kind of iron triangle, balancing those for your products. And for us, right, as kind of Patrick mentioned, we looked at our intent, it was really to provide our application owners, our portfolio owners, and our business partners the right information at the right time to make prudent financial decisions. And so from a cloud perspective, that's what our goal is. And so as we provide the data to give insights or generate insights of, hey, here's the reservation we can make and provide $1 million savings for the enterprise. Or here's some utilization and you can realize $800,000 in action, right? Or non-wasted spend that you can use elsewhere. Those drive actions and provide realized value. And so when we looked at across our products, really, we looked at speed, quality, and cost. And so we wanted to empower people with that information so they can make the right decision right at the right time. And as Patrick mentioned, it's yes, cost matters, but really it's waste matters and how do we provide value? And so do I need to push, do I have a speed? Do I have a delivery I need to make this month? So if yes, I'm gonna focus on speed and I'm okay with waste and we'll come back to it as we run through the cycle again. And so really it's just providing the right information so teams have the freedom, decentralized to make that decision and then coming back with our visibility, optimization, our operations when appropriate to provide that. And ultimately, though we're not there yet, our ultimate goal is to empower the product teams and our enterprise with a unit economics cost. And so I know it was touched on earlier by our partners, Adam and Hui, but looking at that, particularly with cloud, of how do I get to something like for us, cost per claim processed or cost per healthcare insight? Because one of the things that for us, our executives have always asked us, my senior vice president and our vice presidents have always said, well, how do we reduce cloud costs? Which is a good question, but it's tricky. In that cloud costs, if they're architected, and if I say if this, I mean the applications are architected to scale, as demand or load comes into the system, it'll cost more. And so reducing costs may not be the right thing to do. Reducing the unit cost or cost per action is really what we want to strive to. And that's where we're looking to get. We're not there yet, but as we shared, really it's about building credibility and building the foundation. So then one day when we've mastered it with the cloud, we can begin to look at the total unit economic costs. And so with that, I wanted to pass it back to Patrick to walk through some of our key lessons of where we think we are in stages of how we're empowering our team, and then our approach through that.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. So as I said before, this is all very iterative, right? And we've started out and we want to mature our processes over time, but really they're at different points. So we have some things in the walk stage, some things in the crawl stage, some things we're starting to get to the run stage. But I think the consistent thing across all of them right now is that they are all very manual and deliberate. And as we have kind of matured what we're working on, matured our capabilities as a team, we've started to enter kind of into a second phase of what we're doing, where we are beginning to process map the work we're doing, and we're beginning to identify the areas of opportunity for automation. So as we begin to transition from that manual and reactive phase into more proactive, automated type of work process and kind of interaction with the user, we've really started to identify things like around, say, with right sizing. When a right sizing opportunity is triggered, how do we want to notify the user? How do we want to give them the opportunity to take advantage or decline that opportunity? And how do we want to track that? There's other things around leveraging tagging to automate start and stop times for resources, or cleaning up snapshots and unattached volumes. There's a lot of stuff that with with automation and integration into our other enterprise tools, we can begin to move the decisioning of these options closer to the user so that they can consume the data from Cloudability to understand what's going on, but they can really make the decision to do something with the click of a button. So as Jared said, we're progressing through all this. We're not there yet, but really as we start into the second phase of things, that's where we're beginning to focus more of our attention so that we can build out the process structures and the automation flows so that we can leverage kind of the repeatable process brought closer to the end user so that they can really take advantage of these opportunities and do this stuff without us having to, the way it works now is we tell someone what's, like we discuss with someone what's going on, and then they go talk to somebody, that person pushes a button. And it's very manual. And so to get away from that, to just present the information and give that option to click that button right there is where we want to get to. So it's from a usability standpoint, it's much easier for the end user. And from a traceability standpoint, tracking and reporting for us, we can capture that data much more easily. One thing we've found is that we'll bring right-sizing reports to our users or to the app teams, and they'll realize that, oh, that's not a right-sizing opportunity. That shouldn't even be running. I didn't know that was still on. And they'll just shut stuff down and they won't tell us. And so we'll notice a drop in spend, like, great, what happened? But it's not tied to any, if they didn't make a right size, so that item, that resource is not still out there. And we kind of have to go back to the data and figure out what's going on, why did this happen, what's going on, and talk to them to figure it out. Whereas as we can automate this more, that'll make it much easier for us to capture those action items and then track that and report on it. The intelligent automation piece of this, that's kind of the pie in the sky when we get these things automated and then can really start to use, machine learning and such to make some of these decisions for us, so the user doesn't have to get involved, so things can scale. That's the point where we hope to be better integrated with our architecture teams, and we can help from a total cost perspective on the application pattern design, so that from scalability and other perspectives that there's the cost optimization perspective taken into account when those kinds of architectural decisions are being made.
So Patrick, I know we're running short on time. Do you want to hit this briefly? We'll kind of walk through the lessons and maybe make a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah.
If I look at this, and sorry, Patrick, I cut you off, man. Do you want to jump through this? And
Yeah, I can go through this real quick, and then we can hit some questions. So, I guess key call out is that getting folks to change culture is hard. It takes really consistent engagement, building your credibility, and then it also really requires the support of senior leadership. And what we found is we've been partnering with teams to understand their unique use cases, and then creating the tag and business mappings, et cetera, and Cloudability to build that structure out logically in the tool. Is that really those are the keys, those relationships and that understanding is really the key to success. When you talk about tracking and reporting, taking that visibility to the next level to be able to show those opportunities, show what's the recommendations that have been achieved versus what's outstanding, and what we're proposing from a rate reduction standpoint, and what our position is strategically around those types of opportunities to leadership is also key. And then lastly, it's really education. So that the cultural shift is not going to happen on its own. Most of our application teams haven't had to consider cost optimization as part of their development strategy in the past. So helping them to kind of build that financial acumen around cloud cost management is critical, so that we can enable them with the knowledge that they need so that cost can become just one more aspect that they're considering when they're building and running their resources in the cloud.
So Mary, would you kindly go to 35, and I'll briefly kind of hit the lesson so we have a couple minutes for questions. And so I think we've hit on these kind of the themes throughout our presentation, but one is to demonstrate results. And so what I mean by that is to show hard metrics. And I think that's something that's really powerful and speaks to not only engineers, but also to finance and also to senior leadership, kind of came from that perspective. And so, show how you're demonstrating demonstrating visibility into what the spend is, what teams are doing that spend, as well as saving opportunities and realized savings. So for example, for us, what's been really helpful is to actually start tracking those metrics. Patrick's done a phenomenal job putting together a spreadsheet we're starting to automate delivery of and realization of. So teams and senior leaders like our partners in our digital analytics group are able to go and say, I have 5 million opportunities and I've realized 2 million of those. So of this 3 million left, how do I action that? Should I action it? And then we can kind of go back to the decision of the iron triangle before and say, what's the right thing to do for Humana? And so that kind of goes into the next lesson of organizational context, right? If you need to make your data relevant to your organization so they can consume it and make effective decisions. And kind of the last lesson, and I want to pause to answer the question that was asked earlier of kind of what's been the hardest or biggest challenge for us, and it's the culture transformation on two sides, right? Number one, adopting cloud is stinking hard. It's really hard to do because it's a different way of thinking for a lot of engineers. And so not only does it require an education that way, breaking down barriers, particularly for us we are transforming, but we were a legacy company. And it was meant for waterfall methodology. And as a result, there are a lot of silos. And so for us, getting ahead of that early and preparing to be evangelists and engagers and bridge builders has been critical. And so being sensitive to time, would you kindly go to slide 36, please? And this is kind of the last three is sponsorship going around that culture of if we haven't built credibility, if we don't know the context and we aren't engaging, we can't get senior leadership in. For us, our CIO's buy-in and his staff to support this. So people, A, know it matters, B, know why it's important to the business and can engage. And then the last two are kind of along that, right, of changing a culture takes patience. And so for Patrick and I, it's been sitting with and hearing and listening to our consumers on what their problems are and how we can make their life better, but also being patient when they at times just choose to complain about other things that aren't relevant to be what we're trying to solve. And so it's continuing to engage in, maybe the word would be suffer with and suffer through, kind of bearing with them some of the burdens they carry. So they know that we care and we're here to serve them as a financial management product team. And then the last kind of goes back to the first one, right, of building credibility, measure, demonstrate, and celebrate wins. And so, for example, Patrick has done, as I mentioned earlier, the savings opportunity, the savings realized has been really critical to helping push through the culture of why does this matter? Why do we engage? So that as you continue to make changes, people don't grow weary of change. They feel empowered, they feel celebrated, and they feel known kind of through that.
Thank you both. FinOps has really come a long way since its beginnings. With any operating model, there are tools to assist you. As Jared and Patrick briefly mentioned, they use Apptio Cloudability. So next, we wanted to show you a quick demo of the cloud financial management solution. From a FinOps perspective, I would like to pass you over to Patrick Zumar from Apptio Cloudability.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Zumar. I'm a senior solutions consultant here with Apptio. Really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us here today. We're going to spend some time and go through the Cloudability platform. It's geared towards building a FinOps process to help control your cloud spend. So that's really what we'll discuss today. I'll start with a brief slide, and from there we'll jump into the platform and show you a couple landing pages that help to drive this FinOps process. And for anyone that's not familiar with FinOps, the thought is that it's a process, a guiding set of principles to help you maximize your expenditures on the cloud. And as we take a look at this slide, this actually speaks to a very consistent pattern that we see our customers following. You can see as you're progressing forward with time, oftentimes the investment with the cloud continues to go up and to the right. Typically, that's for a couple of pretty consistent reasons. It could be migrating out of data centers. It could be building new applications in the cloud. And as these things are happening, we do see our customers spending more and more on the cloud. Without some sort of a process or a guiding set of principles to control that expenditure, it oftentimes becomes almost like a runaway train. There gets to be a point further along in your journey where there's difficult questions that begin to surface, things that should be typically easy to answer, but do become very difficult. And those are questions like, how much are we spending on the cloud? What have we spent it on? Who's responsible for it? And is there any process for which we can recover some of those costs? So what we're going to show you today is a walkthrough of a platform that can begin to answer those difficult questions. Within FinOps, there's really unique stages or a phase that you'll go through. Those three stages are typically inform, optimize, and operate. So as we progress forward through the platform, I'd like you to keep those phases in mind The landing pages will show you or really kind of speak to these different stages with some principles and kind of tangible things that you can use to drive things like visibility, increasing awareness of what's being spent. As we progress forward into the later stages, it's optimization and cost recovery, and then ultimately operations. So how do we start to put these different pieces into place and ensure that teams are following these across the organization? So as I transition over to our platform, the first landing page that we'll start with are the scorecards. This provides an internal and an external benchmark across a couple of core vectors. Oftentimes we see that our customers are looking for levers to pull to help increase visibility and find paths for optimization. Within this landing page, we offer 4 dimensions. There's kind of 4 core vectors to help with these those kinds of questions of visibility and optimization. The first stage that we'll actually start with is a couple of landing pages around inform. So what we're showing you here first is inform. This landing page is driven by a data lake that we've compiled. So we're looking again at internal and external benchmarking. The external benchmarking giving you an idea of where you stand against cohorts of similar expenditure on the cloud, similar footprint with expenditure and services. The 4 core dimensions that we look at to offer these types of internal and external benchmarks are things like pricing, which primarily looks at things like savings plans, reserved instances, really a question of, are you paying on-demand rates or are those rates less than the on-demand rate? Things like tagging, which directly speaks to those visibility layers within Inform. Elasticity is really a question of, are we taking advantage of the elastic nature of the cloud? And then resizing is really a question of provisioning. If we provisioned a VM, as an example, are we actually using the full capacity for what we've provisioned? So walk through each of these in a bit more context, a bit more detail as we go forward. I'll scroll down here, and again, a thought of our customers and really organizations in general looking for levers to pull to increase these kind of 4 core metrics. You can see initially what we'll provide is really a scoring sheet to give you an idea of the levers that you can pull. In this example, we're using applications, but oftentimes our customers will lean on a different slice of the world. It could be business units, it could be cost centers, it could be accounts, linked accounts, environments. There's all sorts of different ways to measure these pieces. As you select those within our platform, there's the ability to filter those down. So we'll look at those 4 core metrics, those kind of vectors across a really, really unique slice of your organization. Again, it could be business units, cost centers. In this example, we're using applications. And as we look at this first one as an example here, our desktop application, we can see from a pricing score, the score is actually quite low. That indicates one of those levers that we could potentially pull would be through reserved instances and savings plans to lower those on-demand rates. Next to that, we can see our tagging score is actually quite high. It's at 100%. We actually are doing quite well with tagging across the board. So in terms of an action that we can take, a lever that we can pull, we might be able to pull back from tagging. We've maybe put some efforts in place there. It's not really something that we need to look at. As we progress forward, we can see right sizing. So a question of provisioning, are we over provisioned? Are we under provisioned? It looks like for the desktop application, we're actually doing pretty well with right sizing. Things are running just about where they should be. As we kind of look down this list, there's some opportunity to potentially resize some resources. It could be compute, storage, it could be VMs. We'll take a look at that in a second. But as one example here, we can see the production operations application is maybe a bit low on the right sizing side. So there's some opportunity to potentially resize the resources that are running within the production operations application. And as we progress forward to that last score, elasticity, we can see we're actually doing pretty well across the board. We are taking advantage of the elastic nature of the cloud. There's some of those applications are sitting out there with a score of 100, but conversely, we're looking at other things. This is a great example of staging. This could be an environment that we could potentially schedule to be turned on and off on the nighttime and weekend hours. So across the board, you can see just a great example of some different levers you can pull. We'll start to dive a bit deeper into each one of these areas. But again, just a great landing page to initially kind of start to visualize where should we start taking those actions, which levers can we pull. This is something that can be spread across the organization as well. So as we think back to those different phases within FinOps, Inform, Optimize, and Operate, this is just a great landing page, a great starting point for Inform. How do we start to inform different teams, different application owners, different business unit owners of actions that they can be directly responsible for and things that they can start to take, actions that they can take on their own. The next piece I'll show you before we go any further to a different landing page is actually the notification section that we have within Cloudability. I think a great way to think about that cloud spend when left unchecked, if there's no process in place, oftentimes it does become a runaway train. Very common for our customers to have all sorts of notifications set up just to ensure that, for lack of better terms, if there's a train that's left the station, if it is a runaway train, they'd like to be notified about it sooner rather than later. Under FinOps, I think another core tenet is to remove surprises from the billing cycle. So these notifications, as they're configured, is a great way to notify teams of errant spending patterns, budget overages, and really an effort to remove those surprises from the billing cycle. We'll start to walk through these in a bit more detail, but wanted to call out under the inform phase of FinOps, there's also some efforts and support we have available to let you know of those quote unquote runaway trains. The next page that I'll show you is something we call our True Cost Explorer. A great visual representation to start answering some of those difficult questions. I've always found that within cloud spend, oftentimes teams are really just trying to answer questions around what they've spent, what they spent it on, who spent it, who is responsible for it. And this is a landing page that can begin to answer all of those questions just in one central landing page. We do have a concept in our platform that we call views. These are global filters that persist through our platform. You can select them through this dropdown and begin to filter entire landing pages. So we could, in effect, ask the system a question, how much did we spend per application, per business unit, per cost center, to really start answering these kind of multiple questions all at once, just in the central landing page. Within this effort as well, oftentimes this is a great landing page for executives that might not want to look at a large kind of drawn out dashboard or a series of reports. This is a great way just to start answering some questions for the executive team. And as well for individual engineers, application owners, product owners, business unit owners, we can filter this data down and make it very, very specific for their practice areas and begin to find some of those levers to pull individually. So in this example, we can see that the majority of our spend is running on demand. So initially, there's just a tremendous opportunity to shift a number of these resources over to the lower rates, things like reserved instances and savings plans. And within this platform, within this particular landing page, just a number of drill downs available. So we can see that a large portion of this on-demand spend is actually running in Azure Compute. So if we click on this and then maybe select our top line items, this is going to drill us down into the most expensive resources that are running within Azure Compute, specifically within that on-demand spend. This gives us an idea of some of those instances that we can begin to scrutinize just a bit further, maybe begin to ask questions. Are these going to persist? Are they maybe running production workloads? What's sitting behind these different resources? That would give us the ability to further determine if these are good candidates for reserved instances and things like savings plans. We'll take a look at that in just a few minutes here, but again, just a great way to start to visualize the investment beyond some of those initial levers that we just saw on the scorecards page. This is a great way, again, to start visualizing and answering some of those more difficult questions. What did we spend? What did we spend it on? Who spent it? What are the resources that we're directly responsible for? And what are some of the actions that we can begin to take either to increase visibility layers or begin to find some cost recovery and savings efforts? From this page as well, we do have a drill down into the reporting section of our platform. So from here, we can drill into an ad hoc report. This is a kind of a core tenet of Cloudability custom ad hoc reporting. You can see from our True Cost Explorer, we've drilled straight into a cost report. The nice thing with Cloudability is with these reports, they're highly customizable. We can continue adding new dimensions, multiple metrics. Maybe you'd like to see a CapEx and an OpEx view of the world. There's all sorts of different ways we can customize the reports. As well, we're finding that our customers are oftentimes multi-cloud within our platform, be it in a report, a dashboard, that True Cost Explorer. There's all sorts of different ways that we can visualize the multiple vendors in just one central location. So if you're running workloads with Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, we can provide you the visibility across those different cloud providers just in one central pane of glass. As well, that being said, to things like CapEx and OpEx spend, we can show those different outputs across service names. So things like your EC2 spend, your S3 spend, RDS. We can track these across different accounts and subscriptions. So just a really, really powerful reporting engine. I'll scroll down here. And again, you can see in this example, we're specifically looking at the drill down from the scorecards page. So really a question of which resources are running. Are they running on those reserved rates? Are they running on the on-demand rates? the cost of those different resources. So just a great way to start to kind of tease out maybe some different actions that we can start to take across the board. And again, really the call out on this page is custom ad hoc reporting. This is a specific drill down looking into those on-demand and reserved instances running within Microsoft. But from here, we could completely tear this report down and rebuild a report looking specifically at Amazon EC2 instances. It could be Google Compute Engine. We could highlight things like data transfer fees, API requests, your tag values, labels, accounts, subscriptions. We can rebuild these all into one report or focus on really custom pieces, again, in this example, looking specifically at those reserved rates. Now, one more page we'll show you on the inform section before we start to hop forward a bit to optimization. Again, keeping in mind, we'll look at those three distinct phases of FinOps: inform, optimize, and operate. The next one that we'll take a look at is the Tag Explorer. Oftentimes when we work with customers and they're looking to answer those questions of what's been spent and who spent it, tagging and labeling becomes a very crucial component of that effort. So very common for our customers to lean very heavily on the tagging structures and tagging taxonomies to be able to answer those more difficult questions. The Tag Explorer gives you a landing page within our platform where you can start to visualize the compliance of that program, which I think is the larger challenge to tagging and labeling, is oftentimes teams will set the standards for what needs to be followed. And the challenge is by human error, oftentimes engineers and operations teams simply forget to place those tags and labels on resources at the time of provisioning. This gives us the ability really to visualize our teams following those standards as we set them out. A bit of a rhetorical question there. So the thought would be, as we look at this department tag, we can see there's about 5% of the potential taggable spend that we've missed. So when it comes to department identification, we're actually doing quite well. The flip side is if we look at something like the application or environment, we can see very large sections of that investment are effectively invisible to our finance team. A number of resources that we've just completely forgotten to tag. Within this area of our platform, again, a drill down available. I'll click on that application spend, and you'll see that we're going to pull up a report here of the most expensive resources that are running without an application tag. So just a great way to start to identify some resources that we might need to go place those tags and labels on, really to increase the visibility. So just a great way to be, again, to visualize a bit of a rhetorical question: are the teams following the standards that we've set out? And a bit further, which resources are sitting out there that we need to go and place these tags and labels on? Now, this wraps up the section that we'll cover for Inform. There's certainly other areas of our platform that we can assist with to drive visibility and answer questions around what's been spent, who spent it, what it was spent on. For the sake of time, we'll progress forward to more of the optimization efforts. The first section that we'll start with in Optimize is right sizing. So when it comes to optimization, it's almost like two sides to the same coin. You have usage optimization and rate optimization. There's a handful and really a number of different efforts that you can take to optimize your cloud spend. The two that we'll really kind of focus on today are usage and rate optimization. So as we look at right sizing within our platform, we're drawing this data in from sources like CloudWatch, Datadog, Azure Monitor. The data that we pull in allows us to make recommendations to resize compute, storage, and database resources, really looking at a question of what's been provisioned and against the provisioning, what's actually been used. A bit further, we'll click into those view filters. So again, a thought here is we're looking at the entire estate, really the entire footprint on the cloud. The next question then would be, is there the ability to filter this data? So we might want to start targeting specific areas of the organization, maybe looking at the mobile application first. If you recall back to our scorecards, there might be a section there where we start with just identifying that there's an area that we can really begin to optimize based on an application, a business unit, a cost center. So we can select the views from the dropdown and really kind of target those specific areas within the organization. Assuming there's a filter in place, or maybe we just want to start with a global view. From here, what we can do is look at the individual line items, each line item representing a different resource. These are stack ranked based on a thought of lowest possible risk and highest possible savings, the greatest cost recovery. As I click into the View Details tab, you'll see there's about 4 core metrics that we use to build these recommendations. Things like CPU, network, disk, and memory. As we make these recommendations, each action does have a unique savings and a risk profile. That's again all based on the actual usage against the original purchase capacity. In this example, the memory just calls out a great example for us. You can see in each of these windows, the red lines represent the original purchase capacity. The yellow line is a capacity recommendation that Apptio is making, and the blue line is the actual usage, and that's where the risk comes into play. So you can see in this case with memory, the actual usage isn't really ever getting close to that original capacity level. So we're making a recommendation to retain the CPU and the network profile and trim the memory basically in half. You can see that we do pick up on the min and the max usage. So even at points in time when that memory is bursting, it's still not really getting close either to the original capacity level or the recommendation that we're making. And that's really what these are based on, is a thought of low risk, high possible savings, great reward, with the lowest possible risk to the organization. And again, we do make these recommendations for compute, storage, and database. And again, a number of different ways to optimize in the cloud. These are certainly not the only two paths, but the two that we'll really focus in on today are things like usage optimization and rate optimization. So from here, we'll transition over to savings plans. I think it's fairly common that we're starting to see in the Amazon world, teams are shifting away from reserved instance commitments and starting to move to savings plans. Just a bit easier to manage on the front end. So within our platform, we do have full support for the life cycle of this program and reserved instances. As I say life cycle, referring to the initial upfront commitments, the kind of middle of that life cycle is the ongoing efficiency and savings, and then ultimately the notifications of whether or not these parcels are going to expire. So we do have full support for the life cycle of the program. Initially, we'll default to looking at EC2 1-year no upfront recommendations for savings plans, but we do have full support for these programs. I think the majority of our customers look at the compute option as it covers a number of different resource types, a bit less overhead to figure out what to cover. It just kind of covers everything across the board. So again, we do have full support for these programs, both savings plans and reserved instances. And again, keep in mind as we start to look at the different phases of FinOps, we've shifted now into optimize. So we're looking at cost recovery. We've kind of spoken initially to levels of visibility and awareness of what's been spent, who's responsible for it. Are there potentially levers and paths that we can take to increase visibility and potentially find some savings? These last two pages here, we're looking at, again, usage and rate optimization, certainly not the only aspects within the platform that we can help optimize, but two of the most common ones that our customers are leaning on. The next section that we'll begin to shift to is operate. So how do we start to put these pieces in place? And I think this next one, if we go back to one of those initial analogies we used for the cloud costs almost becoming a runaway train, the anomaly detection service is just a really, really powerful service that I would say upwards of 90% of our customers have in place. And really the thought here is, again, that runaway train. If the cloud cost does become a runaway train and it's a bit of an errant pattern, we can notify you of that train leaving the station as often as it's happening. We do look for the billing files as often as they're made available from the cloud providers. And so this landing page, again, is just looking at very, very unusual spending patterns. It's a very powerful aspect just to ensure that alongside things like budget overages, which might be planned, if there's some sort of a static line that you're looking at with a consistent increase, we might begin to project that you are going to exceed that budget. But with an anomaly detection, this is looking for very, very unusual spending patterns, things that are very, very unplanned. This first line item, as we click into it, it looks like it's an overage for EC2 instance usage within AWS. And this one provides just a tremendous example for us. We can see there's a very, very consistent trend pattern day over day. And it looks like on July 11th, there was almost a 4 or 5x increase in the expenditure. That looks like it's a bit unusual. So something like this, we can notify teams of, again, as often as we're ingesting those billing files. So an errant spending pattern like this can send out a notification from our platform to an application owner, a business unit owner, a cost center owner, an engineering department leader. We can get these notifications in front of those individuals very rapidly. And within the platform, again, there's all sorts of different ways that we can customize these notifications where we might want this notification to specifically be delivered to something like the mobile team. So ways that we can take these notifications, again, a number of different notifications and put them in the right team's hands at the right time. And again, this is just a great way to ensure that the cloud spend does not become a runaway train. And if there is, again, for lack of better terms, a train that's left the station that should not have left the station, we'll be able to notify you about it very rapidly. As we progress forward to the operate and kind of remain within that operate phase, we'll take a look at one of our custom dashboards. Oftentimes what we find for the executive teams is the cloud spend increasing can oftentimes be a scary thing. But on our dashboards, this is a specific one with unit economics where we can tell a very powerful story to the executive team, where if the cloud spend is increasing, we can actually tell them that it's a good thing. It could be due to increased customer counts, and at the same time as you're starting to invest heavier in reserved instances and savings plans, resizing the instances through the usage optimization and right sizing. That's a direct way to affect the margins and push the unit economic down. So on a dashboard like this, it's a very, very powerful way that we can tell an executive a story that if the cloud spend is increasing, it could actually be a very good thing. It's a sign of a healthy growth within the company that the cloud spend is increasing because we're increasing customer counts. But at the same time, the cost per customer acquisition cost, those pieces are going down. So things like these unit economics, we can build directly into the platform and begin to tell that very well-rounded story as we begin to look at more of an operation phase. As we're scaling on the cloud, again, it could be moving out of data centers, it could be building new applications in the cloud. As that's happening, this gives us the ability, again, to tell a very good story across all those different landing pages that we've just walked through, all the efforts that the engineering and operations and Cloud Center of Excellence teams are putting into place. We can see they're really beginning to take hold. So as we start with that informed phase, looking to increase things like tagging taxonomies and visibility to be able to identify the customer counts, looking at different ways to find levers to pull to increase that visibility. As we start to drift forward from those levers to optimization, optimizing both the rates and the usage patterns, ensuring that there's no runaway spend. Everything is very planned. There's no surprises in the billing cycle. We're now in direct control of the cloud spend. And in doing so, we're able to tell a very, very well-rounded story to the to the executive teams that, again, if the cloud spend is increasing, it's a good thing. It's a sign of healthy growth. It's a sign of a healthy company, and that the Cloud Center of Excellence is in direct control of this cloud expenditure. And oftentimes it can be a very scary thing to live in this pay-as-you-go world within the cloud. And that really covers the three phases of FinOps. This has been an abbreviated overview of our platform. There's a number of different landing pages that we can walk you through, but these are some of the greatest hits, if you will, and they do cover those three phases: inform, optimize, and operate. So from here, I'll pause and turn it back over to the team for any questions and answers. Really appreciate everyone's time today, and look forward to some good questions.
Well, thank you, Stephen, Jared, Patrick, and the entire Apptio team. Thank you for the great presentation. It was very informative, a lot of great information, and a great demo at the end. Please make sure right now you're going to be seeing a offer that's going to pop up on your screen, and it's for the Apptio 28-day extended trial offer. So if you're interested, hit that Get Started button, and Apptio will get you some information after the webinar to get that 20-day extended trial offer to try out the system. So that's number one. Number two, if you have any additional questions, at the top in the chat, I have put a email address. It's events@apptio.com. So if you're looking for some additional information, another question that you may have about Apptio, please make sure that you use that email address and get those questions out immediately. Before we finish today, I'd like to thank all of our speakers again, and then also Apptio for the sponsorship of today's online learning session. Going back to our reminder, our housekeeping, number one, there are handouts available. If you haven't gotten those, make sure you get those before we close out the webinar today. Number two, if you have any questions additional to what has already been answered, events@apptio.com. Number three, and finally, as I noted before, the session is being recorded and will be available in about 24 to 48 hours. It'll be emailed to you, and then you can also forward that on to your team members, people within your organization who may have interest in the FinOps arena, as well as Apptio's product, Cloudability product. Just as a side note, this recording will also be added to the Dev Network and Developer Week content archive, and that is found at devnetwork.com. So I want to say thank you to all of you for participating, and thank you to Apptio, and have a great and safe day.